So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call the good life. It's December and we're all starting to prepare our allotments for winter, and I'm hearing a lot of people talking about ground cover and what ground cover they could use and what's best. So I'm going to talk about 4 types of ground cover that you can use, and then you can decide what's best for you. And that'd be really great to hear from you in the comments if you use ground cover already and what you find works really well for you. So if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. And of course we're not far off January when it all starts to kick off, and I will do an allotment every single week so you can keep track of what you need to be doing. So let's get started and talk about ground cover and why we do it. Well, the benefits of using ground cover is obviously to protect the nutrients in the soil and to make life easier for us when we go to plant in the spring. That's the idea of ground cover, pure and simple. Now what you choose to use because of what works best for you. I use a multitude of different ground covers, and it does all depend where I am and the amount of space I'm also trying to cover as well. At home I generally don't use ground cover because they're only small beds, so a little bit of mulch or just to keep it weeded isn't too difficult because they're small areas. But when we come up to the allotment and it's a much vaster area, now we're talking a different kettle of fish, because you've got much bigger areas you can cover, and this you're talking about keeping under control and stopping the weeds from growing and making it very workable for you next year. Now when I first got my allotment, I didn't do any of the cover stuff because I didn't really know anything about it, and life was really quite tough to keep it under control. In particular, the ground could be very, very hard, and I also had a lot of weeds. So I started to do things to help manage that, and I'm going to go through some of those things that hopefully will work for you too. Now putting down mulch is a really good way of doing it. The only downside to mulch is getting enough of it. And you don't really want to be paying for it or paying too much for it, and you want it to be natural mulch, because the last thing you want to be putting is artificial things into your soil. We are quite fortunate up at the allotment. We have local tree surgeons that shred up the leaves and the twigs and things, and we get it delivered. So this is what's on here. So this is all free. If it wasn't free, I wouldn't be using it, if I'm honest with you, because it would cost far too much money to buy this sort of thing. Or you can buy a shredder yourself if you've got lots of twigs and leaves, and you can shred them yourselves, or find other places where you can get free mulch. Obviously you've got your composter, so you can use the mulches off your composter. You could use leaves, grass, straw, and straw is quite cheap, but I would recommend leaving it to dry a little bit before you laid it down. But yeah, those are perfectly good mulches you can use. I don't generally put as much mulch down as this. This is a little bit of a trial for me. So I'm curious to see how well this keeps the weeds at bay, because one of my biggest things is keeping the weeds at bay and also keeping the soil moist and warm. So this little area here, like I say, is a bit of a trial for me. So next year we'll see how that works out for me. The other thing is to actually have crops in the ground. That's a really good way of covering the soil and stopping the weeds. So I've got a few things here that are going to be here all throughout the winter. Obviously I'll gradually dig them and use them, but I've got some parsnips, I've got some carrots, I've got some leeks, I've got a couple of things in my raised beds here. I've got some onions, I've got some chard, you know, and crops to cover the ground that you're actually going to eat. So that's one way of doing it, so your soil's not empty. Obviously it's a bit late for too many of those things now, but I will put a link for some things that you can plant if you want to do that towards the end. So those are some really, really viable options. The other thing is green manure. Now I'm going to be really honest with you, I have never planted green manure, and it's not from the fact that I don't believe in it and I don't want to do it, I just have never got round to it. At some point I will give it a go, maybe when we move and we're on our new piece of land, I will do that then. But the benefits of green manure is, again, it covers the ground, it puts nutrients back into the soil. It's a really natural way of doing it, but for that you would have had to have got that seed in several months ago. So we're too late for it now, but if it's something that you want to bear in mind for next year, again, a very, very viable option. There's all different types of green manure that put lots of different nutrients back into the soil. So that's a really awesome way of doing it, and really good for the soil as well. And let's move down to the 4th option, and one that I favour, and it is really quite easy, and something that was an absolute game changer for me when I did start using it. And that's weed suppressant. Not very glamorous, but it really does work. I use a very, very strong weed suppressant, so it doesn't break up or fall apart. That's the big difference with what I use, and I don't use tarpaulin because tarpaulin generally doesn't let the water through. I use this kind of weed suppressant which lets the water through. It's very, very durable, which means I lay it down when I've got a spare piece of uncultivated allotment, and then I lift it back up in the spring when I'm about to plant. So I leave it down all throughout the winter, and this does many, many things. It not only covers the soil and stops the weeds, which is really, really important, it also keeps the ground quite moist underneath and warm. So then when I go to plant and dig in the spring, there's no weeds, the ground's a little bit softer, and it's also a little bit warmer, which then means that things grow a little bit easier as well. So, and all these ground covers help with all the natural, fungi and biomes in the soil as well. So it's really beneficial to do it. And I know some people don't like it because it's plastic, but the reality is we have lots of plastic things like netting and all sorts of things around our allotment, and we actually don't think about them too much. And as I've spoke about it before, if my crops don't grow and feed me, then I have to buy my crops, from my vegetables and my fruit from somewhere else, and I know that the impact of that is going to be far greater than me putting a little bit of ground cover down. Now, if you want to get this ground cover, we do have it in our allotment shop, so I will put a link up on the screen there, and also one in the description. So if you want to buy any ground cover to cover your allotment over the winter, then you can do that. I have to tell you that I do make a little bit of money out of it from Amazon, but if you want to buy it, the option is there for you to be able to do that. So if you are wondering about things that you could plant on your allotment at this time of year, there is a link up on the screen to watch that video, and also one in the description as well.